All right, that would be great.
Thank you for joining us at Ollie. We are doing Ollie Shorts, all the whole, I can't talk today, the whole month of February. And today we are so lucky to have Jill available for, she does all of our dog related classes, which are so much fun. And today we're going to talk about how to move your dog to assisted living. So we're live on Facebook and we have chat availability here as well. So I'll be monitoring for chats and questions if there are any, but Jill, take it away.
All right, thanks so much for having me, Thea. These are always such fun things to do. And gosh, a half an hour. We could be here all weekend, like they say in Vegas, but we'll try to just hit the high points. And forgive me if I stick a little close to my notes. That'll keep me from going down rabbit holes because these things tend to be related to other things. So let's start out by suggesting that preparing your dog to go with you into whatever kind of new arrangement you may elect to move into or need to go into. It could be from downsizing, right? The kids are gone. Who needs to clean this big house? It could be a desire to move into a place where neighbors or friends have moved. And it could be that you need to go into some place where you can get some extra care or people can help you. And I work quite a bit with folks in my dog training practice here who call me about making those transitions. And I think it's like a lot of other things that we try to plan for in advance. It's not always easy or clear to see how the way we've been living with our dogs in our current single family home situation with that nice fenced backyard is or is not setting us up to make a move to someplace where folks are a little bit closer together, where our dogs may need to be a little bit more quiet, a little bit more attentive, a little bit less enthusiastic about the squirrels on the patio, because now there are neighbors upstairs or on either side where perhaps there weren't before. So when we think about pre-planning for that transition, right, it could be condo, apartment, independent or assisted living. A lot of these places now allow residents to bring dogs or have dogs or other pets. But of course, when we live in closer and closer proximity to each other, we have to be mindful of each other's rights and our own responsibilities to those. So just as we're reminded to plan ahead for retirement, for long-term care, planning for funerals, you can pre-plan for funerals, get your will done, have your insurance needs covered, estate planning. This is something to anticipate as well. And you want to think about it before you need it. I mean, my experience indicates that if we fail to plan ahead, the transition will often fail and the dog has to be relinquished. It doesn't have to be that way, but success requires thoughtful preparation on this side of such a major life passage. So here's a quick list. By the time your dog reaches adulthood, or if you acquire that dog as an adult, the time that dog reaches the end of its first year with you, where you need to be teaching it how to live with you, not watching it make decisions and then deciding you do or do not like those. You want a dog who will tolerate handling and manipulation, such as grooming or being held by a veterinary technician and physical examination. Okay. You want a dog who will tolerate the presence of neutral strangers and other dogs. You may not be the only person in your new setup who is enjoying the company of a dog in their new environment. If you're out and about, and some of the places I work with folks here have beautiful landscaping and pedestrian trails that allow them to enjoy like water features and all kinds of stuff. Bike trails, other walking routes are popular with all kinds of pedestrians. So even the most outgoing dog can be taught not to announce or attempt to greet every other person who's passing by. You want a dog who can tolerate restraint or confinement without vocalizing or destroying anything. Using a crate or a baby gate to restrict your dog to a certain part of your new apartment, for example, prevents the dog from teaching himself an annoying habit called I bark out the window at everything that moves, right? And so simply preventing the dog from having access to what we call interactive dog TV around here just saves you a lot of trouble, right? Being able to put your dog in a crate or restrict them in some way if your new resident, if you need something like, a plumber to come in, or somebody has to come in and help you with something, right? If you're having, in any capacity, if you're having caregivers come and go, your dog can't lose their marbles every time the door opens. So teaching your dog, and that has to be an active process. I'm one of those folks who does not think dogs are people. And I don't think that dogs suffer from human psychological disorders like separation anxiety. Those are dogs who simply have not been taught to choose a calm response to restriction. And I start with them when they're puppies, when they're little, as I travel with them all the time. They have to be quiet in a crate, go in a hotel, not be a goofball. You want a dog who walks on a loose leash, where the dog can take responsibility for keeping that leash loose, not you. Imagine if you are trying to keep the leash loose, how much running you're going to have to do to stay caught up with that dog who's always looking to be a little bit further ahead and who has us outgunned, right? 4 legs is 2 legs is no match for 4 legs. They've always got us. They've always got us going. But your dog doesn't have to find perfect heel position to be able to demonstrate usefulness. You'll know if you've achieved this goal of loose leash walking when you can carry a grocery sack or push the grandkids in a stroller and the dog keeps the leash loose, right? Both of those could be catastrophes otherwise. You want a dog who will sit and lie down on command without a leash or a lure, a cookie in your hand, right? Responsive to those commands demonstrates some basic control, respect, and a proper relationship between their dog and their owner. I worked with a woman not too long ago whose apartment was on the 2nd floor of the new facility, and she needed to go down the hall and wait for an elevator to go down. She needed a dog who would sit quietly next to her, walk into the elevator, and sit. Not dance around, jump on people, and make a nuisance of herself. No small feat. You want a dog who comes when they're called without a leash under normal distractions, including the presence of other dogs, or fascinating smells in the yard, or the squirrel, or the child, or the speeding car, because that solid recall will impress your neighbors and it may very well save your life someday. One of the things that we know about dogs as a biological species is that they are opportunists of the first order. That is how they went from catching a half-cooked piece of meat around a primitive or prehistoric campfire to sleeping in your bed in just 25,000 short years, depending on who you read. If you create opportunities, bolting out the front door, your dog will take advantage of those opportunities. That does not make him evil, sinister, manipulative, makes him canine, right? You didn't have to get a dog. You could have gotten a cat. And then we have a whole different set of social challenges. Okay, you want a dog who will do a sit stay or a down stay on a leash in a distracting environment, such as the veterinarian's waiting room, maybe an outing in the park, right? You go to meet friends, waiting in line at the elevator. You might discover that polite dogs are welcome in formerly forbidden public places. And then I think it's fun to have your dog perform at least one trick, like one pet trick, especially for a child handler. Dogs are kind of cheese balls. They like to show off. And having a dog who will perform a trick, like shake hands, is a great way to facilitate child and dog interaction that's safe and not dangerous or scary, because we don't want kids visiting kids to get hurt. And it's really strategic. And mostly we want the dog to exhibit no behaviors that are likely to get him turned out of his home. Dogs are adaptable, and most dogs will adapt very readily to whatever your family's particular rhythms are, but you've got to be proactive about the teaching, about what you want him to know, and you'll spend less time reacting to problem behaviors, right? So that's, I think, a pretty workable list. When I think about how and why we might take those maybe sort of lofty goals and anchor them down, I think about a friend of mine who called me some years ago. She lived in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and they had days and days and days of rain that flooded all of eastern Iowa. They had to relocate the shelter in Cedar Rapids to the Johnson County Fairgrounds. And my friend couldn't go to work because everything was underwater. The water, what do they call it when it's no longer, it stopped, right? It got as far as 4 blocks from her house and then stopped. And she felt guilty, so she went to the shelter to help out. And she said to me, here's what she emailed to me. After 3 long days of staffing phones, she learned one central emphasis. If you have any hope of emergency crews or first responders being able to safely rescue or house your dogs during a disaster, those dogs must be crate trained. She said that they need to be willing to enter a crate calmly and remain there calmly and quietly. You cannot imagine how many dogs the crews had to leave behind on rooftops because even dogs who would let themselves be caught would refuse to be crated. Right? So I don't think that relocation or transitions into new situations as we move into those passages has to be considered disaster planning. I don't think that's what it is. But if you don't train your dog for any other reason, train them to make them transitionable and relocatable for whatever circumstances. If you love them enough that you can't imagine leaving them behind, then train them enough to make sure you don't have to, right? One more story, and then we can see if anybody's got questions. But my friend Liz Outlaw lives in Texas, and she wrote up something that she said I could share regarding preparation to or ahead of Hurricane Harvey. So this was a few years ago. And she was packing up to decide if they were going to have to evacuate. And she said, while I was packing, I realized I was very glad that I had obedient dogs. Number one, I was thankful my dogs are reliable on leash. I can walk all 4 dogs on a leash together because they don't pull and they don't get in my way. I can use their buckle collars and pieces of string if I have to. They're comfortable and relaxed. I can walk them through a crowd. They do the work of staying with me, which allows me to watch where I'm going. I'm not worried about walking them in strange situations, and I can hand the leash to another person and they are okay. They might look to where I go, but they don't pull on the leash and they don't whine and carry on. She said, I'm grateful my dogs are happy in crates, whether they're alone or in a crowded, noisy place. They will wait till I come and get them without making noise. I can leave them in a hotel, in the car, at the dog show, at a friend's house, whatever. They are used to being handled by strangers. They stand quietly for exams. They're not suspicious of people they don't know. They have permanent identification in the form of a microchip. They have good recalls and they respond positively to their names, even if I sound panicked. If I had to call them because the leash failed, I'm confident they would come, even if they were scared. And when they are alarmed, they look to me instead of running away. I trust them to hold a position until I release them. If I have to let go of the leash to open a door, for example, I can tell them to sit and they will hold that position until I release them. They're my companions. All of these skills are taught and practiced until they have a clear understanding of what's required of them. And I test the skills with different scenarios and pressures so they're confident with their job in a stressful situation. And that's an opportunity that we would have too. You can always just take your dog and go stay in a hotel for the weekend, right? And practice what it would be like to walk down the corridor, to have a dog who sits while you open the door, close it again, to ride in an elevator. And hotels, a lot of hotels are happy to have you there, right? So those are the kinds of things I think we want to think about ahead of when we might need them. And I don't know if you're seeing any questions or chatter. Whoops, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
I don't see any questions from the audience yet, but does
Okay.
anybody, if anybody has one, please feel free to unmute and ask. And if you're on Facebook, we'd love to hear from you there too. I have a question.
Okay.
You talked about, from the time that the dog is, until the time the dog is
Mhm.
1 year old.
Mhm.
But can you teach an older dog those kind of things?
You can. And I'm glad you asked that question because dogs are incredibly adaptable and they're neurologically, they're very plastic. If they weren't, something like rescue wouldn't be possible, right? So, and there are dogs that live in the human family from the Antarctic all the way to the Arctic. And the ones who live in the Arctic don't lay in their dog igloos and wish they lived at the equator, right? Dogs they fit in with us wherever we go. What I find is that it's our perceptions and perspectives that become sort of hardened. And sometimes that's the result of a kind of set of misunderstandings or stories that don't serve us very well. I teased earlier about the whole fur baby pet parent thing. That's a marketing ploy. That doesn't have any reality to it. And it's aimed at a corporate goal, which is to drive profit for shareholders, right? And that's the responsibility of a corporation. So if their marketing can bring us back continually to procure goods and services we don't really need, right? I mean, when I started training with Joe Johnson at the Sioux Empire Kennel Club when I was a little girl, we had an equation: dog plus owner plus training, draw the line. What falls out of the equation is a well-behaved companion. But if you cross out dog and replace it with pet parent, you cross out owner and you cross out the dog, replace it with fur baby, replace owner with pet parent, replace actual training with social experiences. What falls out of that is not an enhanced understanding of all that dogs have been in the human family for the millennium. What falls out of that is a shopping list. And on the top of that shopping list are two things that no dog has ever needed in the history of time: clothing and daycare. Dog daycare didn't exist until the mid-1980s. Whatever did we do? Ask your grandmother, right? And of course, if you use that language and perpetually infantilize the dog by making it a baby, you can prey on people's guilt. That's powerful. And if they feel like they're not doing enough, they keep shopping and the shareholders are happy, right? When I mentioned grandma, I think the other thing I see, especially with folks that I've worked with who are 20 to 30 years older than I am and moving into those independent or assisted living facilities, is they often are really suffering a kind of culture clash. They have one foot in the farm dog thinking, and 1 foot in the urban realities of life closer, closer, closer together. And that farm dog logic, right? Here's how it goes, because I get these questions all the time. Rural family acquires a dog, and as the thinking goes, the dog lives outside. There, the dog either learns how to get along and survive, or he doesn't. Either he learns to avoid the traffic, refrain from harassing livestock, leave the chickens alone, doesn't bite the kids or their friends, stays away from the rodent poison in the barn, doesn't impale himself on heavy equipment or get run over by the combine, doesn't wander off the property without knowing how to get back, doesn't chase cars, doesn't menace some of the visitors, or make a general nuisance of himself, or he's dead. To be replaced by another dog who will either be smart or lucky enough to figure it all out, or he won't. So then he's dead, once in a while given away, but often dead as the consequence, and the family gets another dog, and so on. And if the dog does succeed, like that wolf boy in the woods, the one who learns to survive by his wits since there's no one there to actually teach, that dog may go on to live a reasonable life as a farm dog. But the legacy will be that the next generation off the farm, or even that generation as they move into community, are genuinely confused. We don't understand. The dog we had when I was a kid didn't need any training. He just knew how to be our buddy. And that, if you think about it, that kind of lifestyle put a lot of selective pressure on which dogs lived long enough to reproduce. So the dogs who survived to reproduce produced dogs who genetically, in terms of their temperament, might be very much like their parents and figure it out, right? We don't have those dogs really anymore. And if we do, they're spay or neuter to keep populations under control. So I get it, right? But domestication is a thing. We afford the responsibilities, our responsibilities about domestication to the cattle, to the sheep, the horses. We keep them safe behind a fence, protect them from enemies, all that. But the dog kind of lives in a liminal space. He's not really owned. He's not feral. He's not at all wild. And it can be very confusing when you move into a communal arrangement. Which dog did I bring with me? The farm dog who has to feel free? Or what do I hear? He needs room to run. He does. Dogs don't need room to run. They need exercise. That's not the same, right? And people are not sure how to reconcile their perspectives or their history with their current situation. And so sometimes we just have to look at the story that we're telling ourselves and see if it still serves us. And I ask people, give me your stories. I'm going to put them in my pocket and I'm not giving them back. We're going to give a new story, create a new story that will serve us better when it comes to having dogs who can go with us and make those transitions. Speaking of solicitation, you are not supposed to be up here often.
Jill, so I think it would be really nice to have a person like you in my life who could help me, because I don't know how to train a dog to be like that. So if you don't know how to train, where do we go? Where do we look?
You know, that's a tricky question too, because dog training is an entirely unregulated industry. Anybody with a credit card and an internet connection can set up a website, call themselves a dog trainer. And it's a difficult landscape to negotiate, because if for example, you sign up for a flower arranging class and you get to the class and you discover that the instructor doesn't really know the difference between a carnation and a chrysanthemum, you might be disappointed, want your money back, you probably deserve it, but nothing really bad happens. But when dog trainers are incompetent, little kids get bitten and dogs end up in shelter kennels. And so in the absence of regulation, our best bet at this point in history, regulation is coming, which is a whole nother conversation. Look for people who have put working titles on their dogs. So the instructors at the local kennel club, Sioux Empire Kennel Club still runs a really good program for the community, because when you put working titles on your dog, you don't have to rely on customer testimonials. And any of us who've ever been a classroom teacher knows that the best way to get good student evaluations is to pass out A's like Christmas candy, right? You want an instructor who puts their own dog to the test, who goes out and demonstrates over and over and over again that they can do, who satisfies their peers, right? Not their clients. Dog training is consulting in that sense. If the old adage about consultants is that that what the client thinks they want isn't what they want at all. And that's what a good instructor should be able to help with. So that Kennel Club, Sioux Empire Kennel Club, just celebrated its 60th birthday, 1961, so 62, 63 this year. Serving the community for a long time. It's a great resource.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any more questions? Feel free to ask. There's people watching on Facebook, but I don't have any questions coming in.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Well, Jill, thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it. Your talk was fascinating and thought-provoking, definitely. My family is in that situation where we're trying to figure out how this is all going to work, and so this is really good timing for us, and I hope it is for other people as well. So thank you, and I'm so glad you were here. Thank you for the information, and I just want to tell all the other people who are still with us that tomorrow we are doing another Ollie short about ghost hunting in Deadwood. So that'll be interesting. She's been contacting me about could she show some equipment that they use, and
Wow.
I'm like, heck yeah. So we never know. Next week we are closed on Monday because of President's Day, and we don't have another Ollie short until Wednesday. So Wednesday is how to thrift your way to a beautiful home. So if you're a thrift shopper like me, these Ollie shorts are really my favorite things, you know. Please join us. Use the same Zoom link, and I hope that you'll join us for the rest of the month. And Jill, thank you so much.
We can do this again in a longer format sometime.
Absolutely.
Sounds
Absolutely.
good. Thanks,
All
Thea.
right. We will see you soon. Take care,
Okay,
everyone.
take care. You too.